Imagine living a life where every day feels perfect luxury, success, admiration, and a marriage that seems like the epitome of stability. For Stephen and Nicole Schwarzman, their lives were nothing short of glamorous. He was a powerful CEO, she was a celebrated art dealer, and together they were the couple everyone envied. But what happens when the picture-perfect life starts to unravel? Beneath the glitz and glamour, what began as a simple experiment in a world where boundaries are meant to be pushed, soon spirals into a deadly game of betrayal, passion, and revenge. This is the story of a marriage turned toxic, a friendship destroyed, and a life lost in the most shocking way imaginable. Stay with us as we dive into the chilling details of wife swap turned deadly. This video holds the kind of information that could change the way you view relationships and trust. Watch all the way through, because every twist of this story brings us closer to an unforgettable conclusion. Stephen and Nicole Schwarzman were, in every sense, the embodiment of wealth, elegance, and sophistication. When you heard their names, you immediately thought of the upper echelons of society where business moguls, art dealers, and glamorous socialites roamed. Stephen had built an empire with his company, Schwarzman Industries, which was known for its influence in the business world. With sharp acumen and relentless drive, Stephen's reputation was one of power, precision, and success. As the CEO, he had mastered the art of corporate warfare and had made a fortune that not only made him a business tycoon but also a symbol of ambition. Nicole, his wife, was a world-renowned art dealer, a woman with tastes so refined it could turn heads in the most exclusive circles. She was known for her discerning eye for emerging artists and her impeccable ability to spot untapped talent. Her gallery, opened in 2008, was a testament to her expertise, showcasing works from both established artists and the rising stars of the art world. Nicole was more than just a successful businesswoman, she was a figure in the art world who held a reputation for attending high-profile events, from the prestigious Venice Biennale to the ever-glamorous Met Gala. Together, the Schwarzmans seemed like the perfect power couple. Their union, one that had lasted for over a decade, had all the hallmarks of success, wealth, beauty, and respect. They were the picture of stability, admired by their peers, the envy of many, and the centerpiece of every high society gathering. Their marriage appeared flawless, a model of elegance and sophistication. But like many appearances, what seemed perfect on the outside was a facade masking the cracks that would later be revealed. In November 2012, at one of those extravagant events, the kind where glittering chandeliers hung from the ceilings and the guest list read like a who's who of the rich and powerful, the Schwarzmans met another couple that seemed to shine as brightly as they did. The Winchesters, Allan and Vanessa, were every bit as glamorous and well-heeled as the Schwarzmans. Allan, a charismatic businessman, exuded confidence and charm. A self-made man like Stephen, Allan was well known in business circles and had built a reputation for his intelligence and cunning in the corporate world. Vanessa, his wife, was equally captivating, a woman whose social network was as vast as her intellect. She was charming, poised, and had the kind of magnetic presence that made her the center of attention wherever she went. Together, Allan and Vanessa formed a powerful duo, much like Stephen and Nicole. The two couples met at the charity gala, a glitzy affair attended by the elite, where discussions of art, business, and world affairs were the currency of the evening. Nicole, as a guest of honor, was busy making her rounds at the event, while Stephen, ever the supportive husband, stood by her side. Allan and Vanessa, equally at ease in the luxurious setting, gravitated toward the Schwarzmans, and the four of them found themselves deep in conversation. What began as a casual chat over wine and hors d'oeuvres soon evolved into a deeper, more meaningful connection. The couples found common ground in their shared passions for art, business, and the finer things in life. Nicole and Vanessa, both entrenched in the world of art, bonded over upcoming exhibitions and mutual friends. Meanwhile, Stephen and Allan, both businessmen, exchanged insights into the latest investment opportunities and emerging trends in the corporate world. Their chemistry was undeniable. As the evening wore on, the conversation flowed effortlessly between them. The laughter was genuine, the exchanges warm, and the connection felt like one that would only grow stronger with time. By the end of the night, they had exchanged numbers and promised to meet up again. What started as a brief encounter soon blossomed into a real friendship. The Schwarzmans and the Winchesters spent more time together attending exclusive events, dining at upscale restaurants, and collaborating on charity initiatives. Their bond was built on shared interests, a love for the finer things, and a mutual respect that seemed to transcend the typical friendships in their high-powered world. But little did they know, what seemed like a simple, friendly connection would soon take an unexpected turn, one that would spiral their lives into chaos. As the months passed, the Schwarzmans and the Winchesters found themselves spending more and more time together. They attended gala events, enjoyed luxurious vacations, and continued to grow their collaborative charity efforts. Their bond was strengthening, with both couples feeling like they had found true kindred spirits. But this friendship, based on respect and shared interests, was about to be tested in ways none of them could have ever imagined. One evening, during a casual dinner at the Schwarzman residence, Allan and Vanessa broached an unexpected topic, one that would alter the course of their lives forever. In an atmosphere of ease and familiarity, Allan casually mentioned the idea of wife swapping, a concept that, at the time, sounded bizarre but was framed as an adventurous and daring way to bring excitement into their marriages. It was presented as a playful diversion, a way to spice up their relationship dynamics and break free from the monotony of their highly structured, busy lives. The idea was unconventional, to say the least. To most people, it would seem outlandish, an extreme experiment in intimacy and trust. But to Allan and Vanessa, it was a form of exploration, an opportunity to add novelty to their lives in a world where everything could easily become predictable. And what better way to spice things up than with their closest friends, the Schwarzmans, whom they had come to trust. At first, Stephen and Nicole were taken aback. The suggestion was completely unexpected. There was a moment of stunned silence as the words hung in the air, each person processing the idea in their own way. Stephen, always the logical thinker, was initially hesitant. He couldn't understand why their marriage, which had been strong and successful for over a decade, needed something as radical as this. Nicole, on the other hand, felt conflicted. She had always prided herself on being in control of her life and her relationships, but the idea was seductive in a way. It promised excitement, a sense of adventure that could potentially inject something new into their well-established dynamic. The conversation stretched into the night, with Allan and Vanessa passionately explaining their view. They talked about the thrill of breaking boundaries, the freedom to explore new experiences without judgment. For them, it wasn't about love or commitment, it was about an experience, a temporary escape from the constraints of their high society lives. Eventually, after much discussion, Stephen and Nicole reluctantly agreed to explore the arrangement, still unsure of where it might lead but intrigued by the possibility. And so, the stage was set. The two couples, who had once been just casual friends, would now embark on a new chapter of their relationship, one marked by an unspoken agreement to push the boundaries of their marriages in the name of adventure. What they didn't realize, however, was that this seemingly harmless experiment would open a door they couldn't close, leading them down a path of obsession, confusion, and betrayal. As the months wore on, what began as a fleeting adventure quickly became a regular part of their lives. The couples began meeting more frequently, and their encounters became less about just spending time together and more about exploring the limits of their unconventional arrangement. It was exciting at first, thrilling even, as the boundaries of their relationships were tested in ways they had never imagined. The thrill of the unknown, the uncertainty of what might happen next, fueled their desire to continue. Stephen and Nicole, despite their initial reservations, found themselves more engaged in the arrangement. Nicole, always the free spirit, enjoyed the sense of liberation it gave her, freedom from societal expectations, a chance to explore herself in ways she hadn't before. Stephen, at first hesitant, began to embrace the new dynamic, perhaps believing that it would strengthen their bond in the long run. But as the weeks turned into months, something began to change. What had once been an exciting diversion started to take on a life of its own. The emotions that were once contained within the arrangement began to spill over. Nicole and Allan, who had initially kept their encounters physical, started to develop deeper emotional connections. The conversations after their meetings became more personal, their bond growing stronger and more intimate with each passing encounter. Nicole began to confide in Allan, sharing secrets and desires that she had never expressed before. And Allan, too, found himself drawn to Nicole in ways that went beyond just physical attraction. For Stephen and Vanessa, things seemed to remain stable on the surface, but underneath, both began to feel the strain. Stephen's initial hesitation had turned into a kind of uncertainty about the entire situation, while Vanessa, who had been content with the arrangement, began to feel a sense of ownership over her husband. The feelings that had started as mere curiosity began to turn into something darker: jealousy, possessiveness, and the creeping suspicion that something was changing in their relationships. The once exciting and adventurous experiment was becoming a tangled web of emotions, desires, and unmet needs. What had seemed like a harmless adventure had turned into something far more complicated, a point of no return for all involved. The boundaries between fantasy and reality were no longer clear, and each couple found themselves on a precarious edge. What had begun as a seemingly harmless experiment to add some excitement to their lives had started to take a much darker turn. Initially, Nicole and Allan's involvement in the wife-swapping arrangement was nothing more than an exciting physical adventure, a way to break the monotony of their affluent lives. But as time went on, something shifted. What had once been a casual exchange of partners began to blur the lines between fantasy and reality. Nicole and Allan, who had initially shared only fleeting moments of passion, now found themselves drawn to each other in ways they hadn't anticipated. The more time they spent together, the more their physical attraction grew, but so did their emotional connection. At first, their meetings were about fulfilling a desire for novelty, but soon, they found themselves craving more than just physical intimacy. Their encounters became more frequent, and each time they met, the tension between them grew stronger. They started to share intimate conversations, exchange secrets, and confide in each other in ways that their own spouses were no longer doing. Their relationship, which had started as a playful experiment, had evolved into something far deeper. The physical desire was no longer enough to satisfy their cravings. They sought emotional intimacy, too. What was once just a thrill of secrecy and physical satisfaction was now becoming something that they both needed emotionally. Their passion for each other began to take on a life of its own, something neither could control. Meanwhile, Stephen and Vanessa, the two other key players in this arrangement, remained blissfully unaware of the growing emotional bond between their spouses. For them, the arrangement still seemed like an exciting, though increasingly intense, game. They were still caught up in the idea that this was just an adventurous experiment, one that allowed them to play out fantasies and engage in physical exploration. They enjoyed the novelty of the experience and didn't fully grasp the psychological toll it was taking on their marriages. Stephen, who had initially been skeptical of the arrangement, was starting to feel uncomfortable with the entire situation. But he couldn't quite pinpoint why. He just knew that something was shifting between him and Nicole, though he tried to ignore it. His focus remained on the excitement of their mutual arrangement, rather than the emotional rift that was quietly forming beneath the surface. For Vanessa, the thrill of the arrangement had remained strong, though her attention was not on the emotional growth between Allan and Nicole. Instead, she found herself becoming more and more possessive of her husband, increasingly desperate to maintain her control over their marriage. She dismissed any suggestion of emotional connections and preferred to believe that the arrangement was still just a physical escape from the ordinary. The growing intimacy between Nicole and Allan was something Vanessa refused to acknowledge, and her ignorance would soon be shattered by an earth-shattering revelation. On the evening of March 5th, the air in the room was thick with anticipation. The four of them had gathered for another of their regular meetings, and while the atmosphere was initially light and playful, it quickly turned tense. Nicole had been hiding something so monumental that it would change everything. That night, she could no longer keep the secret, and she knew the time had come to reveal the truth. With the weight of the moment pressing down on her, Nicole dropped the bombshell: she was pregnant. But not just any pregnancy, she was carrying Allan's child. The room fell deathly silent. The mood shifted instantly from light-hearted conversation to raw emotion. The shock on Stephen's face was palpable, his mouth slightly agape as he tried to process what Nicole had just said. His mind raced, struggling to comprehend the implications of the revelation. The fantasy he had been living in, a fantasy where everything was under control, had suddenly unraveled before his eyes. Vanessa, on the other hand, did not need any time to process the news. The shock turned to a searing rage in an instant. Her face twisted with fury, her eyes flashing with betrayal as she turned toward Nicole. She had always suspected something was off, but hearing the confirmation hit her like a ton of bricks. For months, she had watched her husband and Nicole engage in their arrangement, thinking it was just a casual diversion. But this was something she could not forgive. For Stephen, the realization that his wife had been emotionally and physically involved with another man, the man standing right in front of him, was more than he could handle. His trust had been shattered, and the foundation of their marriage was cracking. How could Nicole, the woman he had shared his life with, the woman who had stood by his side through thick and thin, betray him like this? His mind raced with feelings of hurt, disbelief, and confusion. The shock waves from Nicole's confession rippled through the entire room. What had once been a playful, thrilling experiment was now an emotional minefield. The bond between the couples, which had seemed so strong just months before, was quickly disintegrating. Vanessa's reaction was visceral. Her eyes were cold with fury, her hands trembling with the need to lash out. The jealousy she felt was suffocating, and the betrayal she was experiencing consumed every fiber of her being. She had always prided herself on being the center of Allan's world, the woman who had his heart. But now, she had lost him, not just to Nicole, but to a deep emotional connection that went beyond the physical. Allan, for his part, remained speechless. He hadn't anticipated this revelation, and now the weight of it was settling heavily on his shoulders. How would he fix this? How could he make things right with both women, both of whom had trusted him in different ways? As the tension in the room mounted, the dynamics between the two couples shifted irrevocably. What had started as an innocent exploration of desire had evolved into something much darker. For Stephen and Vanessa, What had once been a carefree, adventurous venture was now a battle of trust and betrayal. The emotional stakes were higher than ever, and the unraveling of their relationships was inevitable. In the face of such overwhelming emotions, rage, betrayal, jealousy, the friendships that had once existed between the Schwarzmans and the Winchesters seemed distant and fragile. The lines had been crossed, and no amount of explanation or apology would ever be enough to repair the damage that had been done. For Stephen and Vanessa, the fantasy that had once brought them together had now become their worst nightmare. The consequences of their decisions, of their willingness to explore a forbidden realm without fully understanding the emotional cost, were now being laid bare in front of them. The morning after the explosive confrontation between Nicole, Stephen, and Vanessa, the atmosphere in the Schwarzman residence was chillingly quiet. No one could have predicted the nightmare that was about to unfold. Nicole was found dead in the mansion, her body lying lifeless in a pool of blood. The discovery was nothing short of horrific. Nicole, who had once been the epitome of grace and elegance, now lay motionless on the floor, her once vibrant presence reduced to a tragic and eerie silence. The scene itself was unlike the chaotic bloodbaths often seen in crime stories. There were no signs of forced entry, no shattered windows, no obvious signs of a struggle. In fact, everything about the crime seemed calculated, almost methodical. The body was found in a position that suggested she had been attacked with precision, each blow carefully aimed to incapacitate her without a hint of randomness. This detail immediately struck the investigators. Whoever had committed this crime had known what they were doing. The lack of a struggle suggested that Nicole had been comfortable with her attacker, or at least familiar with them. The police theorized that the killer had easy access to the house and that the murder had been carefully orchestrated. Was it a moment of passion gone wrong? Or was this the result of a meticulously planned act of revenge? Stephen Schwarzman, whose life had just been shattered by the revelation of his wife's betrayal, was naturally the first to be questioned. He appeared devastated, his emotions running high, but he insisted that he had been in his study, working late, completely unaware of the events that had unfolded in the house. The Winchesters, too, were questioned, their stories matching Stephen's. Each claimed to have been in different parts of the house during the time of the murder. But as the police continued to scrutinize their statements, discrepancies began to emerge. Something didn't add up. The story that stood out the most was from Annabeth, the maid. She claimed that she had heard Nicole's voice coming from downstairs, followed by the sound of an altercation. In her testimony, Annabeth mentioned hearing a struggle, but the details of her account were vague and unsettlingly rehearsed. It was as if she were trying to paint a picture that didn't quite fit with the evidence. The investigators began to feel that something was off with her statement. She had been a seemingly innocent bystander to the chaos of the Schwarzman household, but now, she was beginning to look like a key player in the investigation. The more the police dug into her story, the more questions arose. How could she have witnessed the murder but been so vague in her description? And why did her account seem so carefully crafted? As the police continued to probe into her background, they uncovered a startling piece of information. Annabeth had been aware of the wife-swapping arrangement between the Schwarzmans and the Winchesters. Could she have been involved in the crime in some way? The police had no concrete evidence yet, but this new information raised more suspicions. Had Annabeth's knowledge of the arrangement driven her to act out of jealousy, resentment, or anger? The question now wasn't just about who committed the murder, but why and what role did Annabeth play in it all? As the investigation continued, the police began to piece together the puzzle of Nicole's death. They questioned each of the individuals present in the house on the night of the murder: Stephen, Allan, Vanessa, and Annabeth. Their alibis were scrutinized, and slowly, the inconsistencies in their stories began to surface. Each individual seemed to have a different account of what had happened, and these differences raised red flags for the investigators. Stephen claimed to have been in his study all night, focused on work and unaware of the events unfolding in the other rooms of the house. However, the police found that his story didn't fully match the timeline of Nicole's death. Vanessa, too, had claimed to be in a completely different part of the house. But when the police cross-checked their statements, there were glaring discrepancies. It was clear that someone was hiding something. Annabeth's testimony had been the most puzzling of all. She initially claimed to have been upstairs, going about her usual routine, when she heard Nicole speaking with someone downstairs. She described the sound of a struggle and then rushed downstairs to find Nicole's body, but there were a number of inconsistencies in her recollection. Her account seemed rehearsed, lacking the emotional depth one might expect from someone who had just witnessed such a horrific event. As the investigation into Annabeth deepened, a shocking revelation emerged. Annabeth had not only been aware of the wife-swapping arrangement but had also been present during some of the encounters between the two couples. This new information added a layer of complexity to the investigation. Could Annabeth have become involved in the crime out of anger or jealousy over the arrangement? Or was there something more to her involvement? The police had little more than circumstantial evidence at this point, but they were determined to dig deeper. They began to re-examine the scene of the crime with fresh eyes. Every corner of the house was combed through, every potential clue was carefully catalogued, and every piece of evidence was meticulously analyzed. And then, the breakthrough came. The murder weapon, a kitchen knife, was discovered in the incinerator. It had been partially burned, but it was still recognizable. Forensic tests confirmed that the knife had been used in the attack. But what truly caught the investigators' attention was the discovery of Annabeth's fingerprints on the handle of the knife. The match was conclusive. This new evidence was a game changer. The police now had a tangible connection between Annabeth and the murder weapon. The question was no longer about who had killed Nicole, it was now a matter of why and how Annabeth had become involved in such a horrific crime. Annabeth, once a quiet and seemingly inconspicuous figure, was now thrust into the center of the investigation. Her role in Nicole's death became increasingly suspect, and the police moved quickly to bring her in for further questioning. With the weight of the forensic evidence mounting against her, it seemed that Annabeth's fate was sealed. Under intense questioning, Annabeth finally broke down and confessed to the murder. She revealed that Nicole had caught her stealing from the safe and had threatened to report her. In a panic, Annabeth grabbed the knife and stabbed Nicole in a moment of desperation. She hadn't meant to kill her, but the situation spiraled out of control. Annabeth's actions, driven by fear and desperation, led to the tragic death of Nicole Schwarzman. The jury deliberated for hours, ultimately delivering a guilty verdict. Annabeth was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read out, the once quiet maid, who had seemingly been just another member of the household, was revealed to be a ruthless killer. What lessons can we learn from this tragic tale? First and foremost, trust and boundaries in relationships are not something to be taken lightly. What began as a consensual arrangement between two couples quickly devolved into a complex web of lies, betrayal, and murder. Psychologically, the emotional stakes of this arrangement escalated in ways no one could have predicted. Nicole and Allan's connection, initially driven by physical attraction, soon became emotionally complicated, ultimately leading to irreversible decisions. For Stephen and Vanessa, the pain of betrayal drove them to the edge, and their actions, while driven by emotional impulses, were fueled by years of repressed anger and hurt. The murder was not just a moment of physical violence, it was the culmination of a series of choices that each person made, each one leading them down a darker path. Ultimately, this story serves as a reminder: sometimes, the thrill of excitement or the temptation to break from the norm can have devastating consequences. The Schwarzman and Winchester families will never be the same again. So, what's the ultimate takeaway from this tragic tale? Relationships are delicate, and the line between excitement and destruction is thinner than we often realize. Betrayal, whether emotional or physical, can leave lasting scars, and in this case, it led to an irreversible tragedy. As we close, we want to hear from you. What do you think led to the tragic turn in this story? Was it the arrangement itself, or something deeper within the people involved? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Va nu ban chua dang ky, dung quen dang ky crimes of passion dabayat them en hung kachawi en toi fam ko that gay soc ki en ban fi dat kahoi ve moi Thursday ban gi min bayat ve tin yu, suk fan boi va tam li kan nuoi. Until next time, take care, and remember, things are never as perfect as they seem.